As has been explained, I'm Mrs. Deputy, and for those of you who may not have heard of the ICO before, we're the UK's Independent Data Protection Authority. We wear a number of different hats. We are part investigator, part regulator, researcher, advisor, and complaints handler. And the issues and challenges we're discussing here are amongst some of the most important in our brief today. Our approach here in the UK has been to research, investigate and observe closely the development of live facial recognition technology as it arrived on our regulatory shores. I've got visions of elephants swimming onto a beach, but we are where we are. By comparison to other issues we see in the world of data protection, its arrival has been relatively quick, and the pace has certainly picked up over the past year for the reasons which have already been set out. From our side, towards the end of the year, we concluded our first investigation on this theme, that into how police use LFR in public spaces. This followed a period of investigating the pilots of systems in 2 police forces. Our investigation also, as has been covered here, found support for police use of technology, but also concern. We concluded that there needed to be improvements in how the police authorised and deployed the technology if it was to retain the public confidence aspiration at the heart of the UK policing approach. We set out our views in the first ever formal Commissioner's opinion for police forces to follow, and more on that shortly. But the technology advances, the elephant grows bigger. We are now coming to a conclusion on the first set of investigations of the commercial applications of LFR, and it's likely, if I were in the guessing game, that there would be an opinion for the commercial sector coming along soon. We are also looking very closely at the interactions between public and commercial uses of the technology and the data sets involved. And of course then there is also the international context to this work. The issues we're considering are the same ones that our colleagues in privacy authorities around the world are grappling with in the same way, drawing on their own legal and cultural traditions. How we share that learning and find the synergies in our work has been part of the theme we've been looking at. So, mindful of the time I have with you this evening, I want to give a quick overview of the use and regulation of LFR in the UK from the data protection perspective. I understand there are others with a different interest. As this technology processes the personal biometric data of identifiable individuals, data protection law will apply. So I suppose one of the key questions, to continue the theme of questions as well, is LFR being used widely in the UK? Well, yes, it definitely is being used. But at the moment, as a regulator, we see that there are perhaps a larger number of organisations who are still curious, testing, dipping their toes in the water, and looking at the potential capabilities of the technology rather than using it routinely. We as an office have been prioritising our interest towards those who propose to use the technology as a normal course of their business, or as part of their core business model, or at scale. We have learned also, though, that we have to be reactive and keep our eyes and ears open for new and novel uses of the technology, and the innovation really is quite startling. We have all seen the related stories that pop up in the media as organisations launch new services or approaches. It is important to note this point, I feel, because we are seeing the use of LFR across both public and private sectors in the UK, and we therefore need to tailor our approach accordingly. We have seen police and law enforcement agencies begin to test the capabilities in public spaces with a view to help assist the prevention and detection of crime. We have also seen, as has been mentioned, the technology used retrospectively to identify specific individuals from footage as opposed to locating them in real time. The ICO, as an office, recognises the potential benefits in terms of public safety and security that appropriately governed, regulated and deployed LFR could provide. One of the key questions then, under the GDPR, is around fairness. There should be a balance struck between the privacy that people rightly expect as they go about their daily lives and the surveillance technology that police need to effectively carry out their role. We need to ask ourselves where that balance lies between potential benefits to society and what I think are also potential drawbacks in terms of a potential loss of privacy and large-scale data collection. Therefore, to comply with the privacy rules, our view is that forces must provide sound evidence to show that the technology is strictly necessary, balanced, and importantly, effective in each specific context in which it is deployed. This includes addressing the issues of bias identified by researchers. These considerations are at the core of our opinion. This contrasts with the key aspects we look at when LFR is being used on the commercial side. Here we are seeing applications aiming to improve customer service, make it easier to live our lives, and for businesses to reduce their operating costs. But we are also seeing the beginning of applications to track and make decisions about fellow citizens in the commercial context, such as recruitment or education, and sometimes in a less transparent manner. And so the questions around fairness there are a little different, as are those of transparency. Would someone in a retail space expect this to happen and for the technology to be used there? How do you explain that it is happening in a fair and appropriate manner? And there are also big questions around data sharing, both within the private sector and in the circumstances where public information is shared with private sector organisations or private sector technology is used for public duties. We are aware that such technologies can be an attractive solution to the organisations and the problems that they face. The uses of LFR we have seen recently, for example, can assist with reducing queuing times, streamline authentication and authorisation, sometimes for vulnerable groups who find it difficult to do so in different ways, or to grant more accurate access into secure premises. However, from our view as the regulator, these uses still have to meet the basic privacy tests. They need to be proven to be lawful, necessary, justified, effective, including addressing those bias concerns, and proportionate if it is to enjoy public confidence. So focusing for a short while on UK data protection law, it's important to understand that it is a complex legislative framework that is in place for processing such biometric data. I'm sure that this audience are no strangers to the GDPR, but in the UK there's also the accompanying Data Protection Act. There is a dedicated part of that Act for law enforcement, which transposes the obligations in the Law Enforcement Directive into UK law. This is a core element of data protection legislation covering police use of personal data, and our recent work on the opinion has focused on this. It is important also to note that data protection should not be perceived as a barrier. As the Commissioner says and reminds me, we are not the Ministry of No. Data protection in the law in the UK was born in the 1970s out of a concern that the emerging potential of new technology might be lost if society didn't have the confidence to embrace that technology. Digital privacy regulation has a crucial role, therefore, in reassuring people that protections are in place while supporting innovation. And that's especially true in the context of LFR. We must strive, therefore, not for innovation or privacy, but innovation with privacy. And that is why at the heart of the Data Protection Act is the concept of privacy by design. We apply that, whether it is in the context of protections for children using online services so they're kept safer, hospitals using AI to treat their patients better, or organisations seeking to use live facial recognition. So what do we expect as the regulator? As with the processing of any personal biometric data, there has to be a clear, lawful basis to demonstrate that the processing is fair, lawful, and, where appropriate, transparent. We expect there to be rigorous data protection impact assessments conducted prior to any processing, outlining how the processing adheres to the principles of data protection law and how data protection by design principles are being implemented. Where risks cannot be mitigated, we expect to be consulted on the proposals in advance. And there's a tougher message also. Where organisations fail to follow the law, we have a range of enforcement and sanctioning powers, ranging from warnings through to enforcement notices to stop the processing, and yes, if necessary, monetary penalties for deliberate or harmful or serious contraventions. We continue to look closely at the technologies it's applied and will be using the full range of our powers as is appropriate, including through further investigations and audits. And we want to work with others to minimise regulatory burdens in that regard, to reflect the different perspectives which we each bring and which we will hopefully discuss this evening. So we've certainly been busy in terms of researching what's going on and investigating the uses of LFR in the UK, and as I said, particularly in the law enforcement sector. In October last year, we published our findings in relation to this first phase of investigation. As part of that, we also undertook some research looking at public attitudes, and we found a similar position as being described in some of the other literature. Over 80% of those surveyed indicated that they felt it was acceptable for the police to use the technology, and they agreed that it should be used on a permanent basis in areas of high crime, 75%. And of those surveyed, the support did tail off for lower level crimes, so there was a clear message for us as a regulator about the type of crime that it was being targeted for. But the acceptance about the use of facial recognition technology was balanced, and in the qualitative research, citizens explained and demonstrated that they only want facial recognition technology to be used when and where necessary, and importantly, they want to know when it is being used, with the opportunity to object and find out if their faces are being processed and stored. So in recognition of this, in the same time as making recommendations to the two forces involved, we published our opinion. And the core of that opinion is that sensitive processing occurs irrespective of whether that image yields a match to a person on a watch list, or the biometric data of an unmatched person is subsequently deleted within a very short space of time. Our view is that data protection law applies to the whole process of LFR, from consideration about the necessity and proportionality for the deployment, through to the compilation of the watch list, the processing of the data, through to its retention and deletion. We feel that controllers must identify a lawful basis. This should be identified and appropriately applied in conjunction with other legislative requirements, such as codes of practice. And we intend to work with others with a view to strengthening the legal framework by means, hopefully, of a statutory or binding code of practice issued by government. And our view is that intelligence-led, narrowly focused and specific deployments related to the prevention and detection of serious and violent crime are, in our view, more likely to meet the necessity and proportionality threshold than more speculative uses. So the opinion is just that. It is how we will regulate should we get concerns and complaints and see wider application. But it needs a stronger framework to operate in. It's an important new technology with potentially significant privacy implications for citizens. Our opinion recommends that the government introduce a statutory and binding code of practice as a matter of priority. The absence of such a code and national guidelines that go with it contributes to a potential inconsistency of practice, increases the risk of compliance failures, and could undermine confidence in the use of the technology. The challenge is not to be in a position of a code for every technology as it's introduced, but the complex landscape and issues in this particular context we feel are deserving of that attention. So the technology remains a high priority for the Office, with a range of investigations and policy developments, and of course our regulatory sandbox as well, which is looking at the application of the technology in the aviation context in a safe space to test. And that will continue to be a key part of the work that we do. But it's this commercial application that will continue to be the focus for our Office for the coming months. We're looking very closely at the manner and means by which the seed lists are gathered, shared, or sold, and the justification for the processing of such images, as well as the impact on the individuals of the application and decision-making that is proposed to accompany some of these commercial applications. As always, we'll continue to update you and provide information through our website. We prefer compliance, and therefore we're producing a range of resources to help organisations comply with the law. And we're also, in this context, also going to be updating our existing guidance on the use of video surveillance technologies more broadly, including body-worn video, ANPR, and drones, to name but a few. So we've started the regulatory journey with this elephant, from the development of LFR through to AI systems that analyse gait analysis and predict ear motions. Those will all feature as part of our work going forward. It is right that our public services should be able to innovate and use new technology to improve the services and our lives. But from a regulator's perspective, we must ensure that everybody working in this developing area considers and works to satisfy the full rigour of UK data protection law. Moving too quickly to deploy technologies that might be overly invasive into people's lives risks damaging trust not only in the technology but in those organisations themselves. We must all work together to protect and enhance that trust. Thank you for your time and your consideration.